And I'm going to shut off my screen in a minute, but I have all my materials. Great. Thank you. Thank you folks for being here today. This is James Allison. Emily, are we recording?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I will call to order the Pen One board, starting with Emerald Bogue. Okay. It sounds like we don't have Emerald.
I know she's
you do. I'm sorry.
Okay, great.
Emerald is here.
Great. Thank you, Emerald. Claudio Campuzano.
I am here.
Thank you, Claudio.
Sorry to be late. I had to fight my daughter for the space heater.
I won't ask who won. Annalisa.
I am here and luckily not fighting with anyone to get access.
Great. Thank you, Annalisa. And Jeff Noodleman.
I'm here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Happy New Year, everyone. We'll go ahead and move into agenda item B, public testimony.
I don't expect any.
Okay, then moving on, we'll move on to item C, an executive session. Hung, do I bring us into executive session?
Yeah, go ahead and please read the specific reason for it.
Great, thank you. The Pen One board will now enter executive session pursuant to ORS 40.255, ORS 192.3559A, and 192.6602F for the purpose of discussing confidential legal advice and attorney-client communication not related to litigation.
So Jamie, if you can just excuse us from the executive session.
Oh, great. Okay. So the Pen One board is now out of executive session, and we are in the public session now. Moving on to agenda item D, feasibility study, projects over.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Mark. Just share my screen here. Morning and welcome. Welcome to another update to your feasibility study. Can everyone see the screen? Okay, great. Well, this morning, in the effort to respond for board requests for future information, we've covered several of these items in our last meetings. Today, we're going to focus on item 4 and item 6 here on this list. And item 5 will be addressed more comprehensively at the format next week. We wanted to put these back up for your benefit. This is a list of objectives that we developed in conjunction with the core project team back during the charrettes over 2 years ago. And so every once in a while, it's worth repeating them. Obviously, you can read them in short: reducing flood damages, improving resilience, redundancy, and some of these other items, not explicitly towards certification, but obviously, as you all are aware, we've covered some of those items. So some of the benefits that we've received: first of all, a $3 million feasibility study that has not required a local cost share other than our staff time. That dealt with system-wide projects over a 50-year time horizon, and included in that was a fragility analysis that LRC did not have, a more comprehensive fragility analysis of the levee system that LRC couldn't complete during our local investigations. Completed in 2017. Also included hydrologic and hydraulic analyses, economic benefits analyses, and life loss modeling, all that were not anticipated or resourced previously. So it goes without saying, as I mentioned, 4 of the FEMA certification projects, the most comprehensive and expensive and extensive ones, are included in the list of projected projects to be completed by the feasibility study. During the study, we did some optimization, and that addressed level of protection concerns in terms of livability concerns that residents had in Pen 2. And probably most acutely, the study is proposing a solution for the railroad embankment that will address that cascading failure scenario between Pen 1, Pen 2, and MCDD. Some constraints that we encountered. Obviously, the project was only authorized for flood safety, did not incorporate environmental restoration like some and other business lines like some core studies. We also had a little more limited local control of the process. So we in this region are fortunate enough to have a lot of processes that involve a lot of public input. Maybe the Corps been criticized a lot in the past, and they opened up a little more, but it's obviously still a little bit less than what we're accustomed to. That said, particularly in areas such as Pen 2, the Bridgeton Road, and Marine Drive solutions, it demanded a lot more public involvement, and the Corps did stretch to provide more public involvement than they were accustomed to or that they had planned to. So that was a win. I want to talk about the changing nature of storms, and when I talk about some of the findings, one of the biggest challenges we have is that we are dealing with a design storm. We're no longer dealing with the spring freshets that the system was designed to handle, but more of these warm rain on snow events that include, like the 96 floods was a warm rain on snow event where the winter snowpack was melted dramatically in more localized drainage basins that, say, the Columbia River dams couldn't mitigate. And so we saw faster runoff. The storm we had just the last couple of days reached, well, it hasn't peaked. It's going to peak tomorrow at almost 14 feet on the Vancouver gauge. It's just another sign of these more frequent winter rain on snow storm events. So Pen 1, one of the main findings is that Pen 1 is the highest probability of failure prior to overtopping. This, of course, due to the levee, the railroad embankment, but also some new findings with respect to the Columbia Slough levee system. Pen 2 is the most susceptible to overtopping. And then we found other various levee stability and seepage problems throughout the system, as well as opportunities to improve resiliency and redundancy in the pump stations. The non-structural measures that you may recall hearing about at the tentatively selected plan stage, those have not changed amidst all the other fine tuning over the summer. These measures are still in place. So I want to talk briefly about the improvements. I think you folks are pretty aware of them. The centerpiece is the railroad embankment. I think you all recall the adjustment to the elevation target for the improvements. So we're still increasing the level of protection, just not quite as high as previously planned, going to 38 feet. That means that we are not replacing the flood wall on the riverside in Pen 1, but we are creating a setback levee. We're doing improvements to the slough levee, and we are replacing the low spots in the northeast corner of Pen 1, one of our certification projects. So a lot of great improvements in Pen 1. Here's a visual. This is to scale, so the improvements along Columbia River are kind of faint to see. I just want to talk briefly about the costs. Again, we're going to talk a little bit more about the staging and phasing of these costs at the format next week. But most important to note for the individual boards is that our preliminary engineering design costs, total about $11 million. The local match will be $3.85 million. And that, it's important to note, that is the total local match between the 4 districts. And Colin's going to talk a little bit about allocation of those. Also putting up the number for construction phase. It's 130 million. That includes a 25% contingency. So I want everyone to be aware of that. The local match is $47.6 million, and that is about 37%. We'll talk more about why we're at 37 versus 35, the format, but it's basically due to a minimum local cash contribution. And I do want to also point out that the PED costs, those costs are creditable towards our minimum 5% cash contribution for construction. So, so we kind of get a credit for that. Last thing I just want to point out is this interest during construction. Interest is a term that the Corps uses to actually describe what is better described by inflation factors or CPI adjustments. And these are not, this is not a separate cash line item. This is simply an accounting for the rising costs of the price indexing with time as we go through several years of construction. So there's a $2.27 million increase and a 7% CPI over the construction phase. So I'm going to just give you an opportunity to, I went through that pretty quickly, answer any questions before we shift to Colin. And he's going to talk more about the allocation of these costs.
Any questions?
Okay, hi, this is Colin, and I apologize I'm not with you via video. It's the 3rd day in a row that Zoom has caused my computer to melt down. So I think everyone is experiencing Zoom fatigue, and my computer is amongst them. So I'm going to very quickly go through some of the cost allocation methodologies that the boards have requested, but before doing so, I just wanted to highlight a few considerations on the timeline for when this funding is needed. So if we are authorized in the Water Resources Development Act of 2022, that's commonly acronym is WRDA. If we're authorized in WRDA 22, the cost sharing for the pre-engineering design will need to come from the existing districts. And so this cost allocation we'll need to bring this back up and keep on working through this with the boards because that funding would be needed in early 2023 or possibly very late in 2022. If we are authorized in WRDA 2024, it's a 2-year cycle for that, it is possible that the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District Board would need to approach paying the pre-engineering design. So just want to highlight that there are some uncertainties, but we do want to give you some cost allocation methodologies to chew on at this point. To develop these, we took a look at a few things, making sure that we are considering allocation methodologies that were equitable, ones that we could approach different partners for possible help, and also taking a look at different ways to combine methodologies to make sure that they made sense from a cost benefit approach. We also wanted to look at ones that allowed us to measure the impacts of cascading failures to the system. So that's to better recognize the mutual reliance of all the districts and really the fact that this functions as a system. So you'll see a few bulleted out methodologies on the slide. I'm just going to very high level touch on what the what would be in each one of those. The project cost per district, I think that one's the most straightforward. And that really is exactly what the Corps has identified as those project costs for each district, and just do a percentage of that that would be required for pre-engineering design. Of course, that doesn't address the shared benefits and some of the different risk levels based on population or the economics behind the levees. You as board members would probably be most familiar with number 2 and 3 here, the levee mile and acreage. Those are things that we use in your IGA with MCDD for things such as mowing the levee. So that is not of necessarily the most accurate reflection, again, of those shared benefits or the economics of population. Ones that I think bear a little bit more digging into. The first one is the replacement value. Those numbers in the replacement value, or the affiliated percentages, are drawn from Oregon's Department of Geology and Mineral Industries HAZIS analysis that was specific to our levee system. So HAZIS is a FEMA tool that measures flood loss data from around the country. HAZIS means Hazards of the United States. Replacement value is the building cost for loss at a 500-year flood, plus the loss of the contents in the inventory. So contents are things like shelves and furniture. Inventory are things that you have in your refrigerator. So those are damages at that 500-year level. And then the two economic benefit ones, that those are drawn directly from the Army Corps of Engineers feasibility study. Those are based on the various flood scenarios that were modeled. So those are representative of the cascading failure approach, and then that takes a look at what the economic losses are based on those different scenarios, and those are the numbers that are used by the Corps to create their benefit cost ratio and go into the National Economic Development analysis. The one that kind of is a blending that we took a look at is both the project cost plus the economic benefit. And that would, of course, be a little bit closer to a utility model where you take a look at the costs and then the benefits, the cost being the project cost and the benefits being those that would be realized from that economic analysis. And then we can take a look at other composites based on what the board recommends. But at this time, I just want to quickly take a look at what some of those break down to for your district, and then just different ways that we could approach paying for it. So if you go to the next slide, please, Mark. So by the percentages, for Pen 1, you have the broadest range. So of course, you could do it equally, 25% for each district. You could be as low as 3% based on the replacement value of the 500-year flood, and as high as 40% if you were going to use the project cost. So there's definitely the broadest range for your district. What does that look like in dollars? Mark, if you go to the next one, if you take a look at that $3.85 million, that is the local sponsor share of the $11 million. Oh, nice. My computer just woke up, so I'm here. So that of that 3.85 million, if you were looking from the 3% all the way up to the 40%, you'd be looking at a range of 0.42 million up to 1.35 million. And of course, that is that is spread across a number of fiscal years for you. It's a 2-year process at the minimum, but when you actually look at it as it's spread across fiscal years, it's distributed across three years. So definitely a good chunk of money to take a look at. So I guess the next question would be what ways can we look at to secure that 35% match for pre-engineering design? So on this next slide, please, Mark. Thank you. So when looking at these options, there's, of course, the most direct and familiar, which is using your district budgets and assessments, recognizing that is a big lift for any of the districts, and especially for Pen 1. But there are other ways that we can go about raising this local match. It would be seeking cash and in-kind contributions from some of our partners, and that is through striking MOUs, IGAs, also taking a look at things that would bring overall costs down, such as securing easements and other real estate or environmental work that's needed. There's also the negotiation of in-kind services that would be credited for the local district. A lot of these, some of these would be realized during the construction phase, but it buys down the overall project cost. And then I think the two things that we need to dig the deepest into are grants and loans. So applying for public and private grants, there are opportunities from some other federal agencies, definitely the state, where we can look for grant funding. For private entities like Pew Charitable Trust and others, they do have, there's a few private grant funders that do flood risk or hazard mitigation. And of course, in this economic environment, there's a lot of competition for those. And then the seeking public and private loans, the public loans are things like Business Oregon's Infrastructure Finance Authority loans, which Penn 1 has already entered into in the past, and you're familiar with those. And so those have very competitive terms, and they do involve some state support in providing those. And then private loans would be looking at possibilities of a bank loan. So there's no decisions at this point. And these are conversations that your board and the other boards will be having in the coming months. But we did want to provide you at least a first cut of some of these potential allocations as tied to that $3.85 million for PED, and want to open up for any questions. I know we're limited for time, so thank you.
Great. Thank you, Colin. Any questions?
Yeah, this is Claudio. Do you think you could just go back to the list of
mostly for
Can you just go back to the list of allocation methodologies and just I'm just one couple, yeah, there we go. And you know, could you just give a little bit more of a sense of the project cost plus economic benefit? I think I got all the others. Really wanted to nail down where you guys were thinking with that one.
Sure. So if the previous one, just the economic benefit, that would be irrespective of the project cost. So that is just what economic benefits the feasibility study has identified for each one of the districts. The economic benefits plus the project cost, or I guess probably divide project costs, that would be a composite of how much your total project cost for each one of the districts would be, and then based on that cost, how much economic benefit is realized. So it spreads the cost based on who is actually realizing the most benefits from the cost, and it definitely reduces for Penn 1. You're kind of in a pretty unique position, I guess, in that you have the highest cost because of the vulnerabilities to the system, but you also have the lowest economic benefits because of the amount of structures. I mean, I think you're familiar with the reasons why. And so that one does a better job of kind of recognizing that, yes, you do have a lot of project costs, and that will allow Penn 1 to sort of develop as land use plans allow it to be used. But it still recognizes that, you know, you don't have an international airport directly behind the levees. So it better spreads that responsibility and without kind of spiking on either side of things.
Colin, this is Mark. I just wanted to augment on the economic benefit versus the replacement value. That takes into account the actual failure scenarios, which is why some of it involves that cascading scenario, which is again why it's like, if you look at MCDD, they have low project costs, but they have a huge economic benefit, not just because of their assets, but because those potential failure scenarios at the cross levy, as well as through Penn 1 and Penn 2. So again, yeah, it does sort of help average those things out to attribute the costs and the benefits more equitably and accurately over.
Yeah, just trying to understand, you know, what the math was that drove this. It seems like the project cost plus project cost and economic benefit is really kind of a weighting approach. Does that seem, would that be, because it seems like you got your economic benefit, which is relatively low percent, you got your project cost, which is very high percent. So it lands somewhere in between. So it's really a weighting of those two factors. Is that what I'm getting?
That is correct.
Great, thank you.
other questions for Colin or Mark? Okay, great. Thank you. Great presentation. Moving on in the agenda to item E, CIP update.
This is Peggy. I am asking, I know you got your packets and summaries in your packet. And this is normally Bill's coverage, and he is out fighting floods and concerns in Pen 2, and will be able to be here later in the meeting to address the assets and liabilities, but would request that if you have any questions to hold them till he is back.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hope everything is going okay out there. Does that mean we should jump to item F in the agenda, the boundary update process?
Please, thank you.
Great. Okay, let's do that. Item F, boundary update.
Good morning. This is Kelly Sherbo. In your packet, you received a memo that gives some background to the boundary process and status. I put in a little bit more detail than normal because we do have some board members that are new and were not part of this original decision-making process. And so just briefly, when Pen 1 was founded in 1917, the district boundaries were a little bit bigger than they are currently. In 1933, several of the property owners along the northern boundary opted out of the district, and they felt like they had kind of built up their properties to a safe level. Subsequently, flooding events sort of proved that that wasn't sufficient, and somehow in the process of switching to MCD management, the boundary that was presumed to for assessments included those properties. Through the accreditation process, we learned that those properties were actually out, and so now we've gone through this process to get those landowners to petition, or at least 60% of the land to petition to be back into the district. So we did receive 3 petitions from landowners, which is significantly larger than 60%, which is the legally required amount for us to file a petition to get that property back into the district. And so our lawyers at Miller Nash have filed that paperwork as of December, the end of December. And so the judge set a hearing for February 24th. And at that date, we will learn whether there are going to be any interveners in the process. If there are no interveners, then we would file a motion for summary judgment, and hopefully the court would grant that and authorize us to move forward with the boundary adjustment. At that point, the 3 commissioners that we identified and the court has approved would evaluate the benefits and damages to those properties and make a recommendation to bring those properties back in, hopefully. And once that's done, we have to file some paperwork with the Department of Revenue by March 31st. And if we meet all those deadlines and everything goes smoothly and we don't have interveners, then we should be able to assess those additional properties in this next fiscal year. And I think the amount that it will increase your assessments by, I want to say, is maybe 35 or 40,000. I think Casey has a better off the cuff number for that.
Off the cuff.
So that, you know, at least over the next 5 years, that could make a significant bump to your budget. So are there any questions about the process or the status or the history of this? I know some of the board members are a little newer to this process, so I'm happy to answer anything.
No, it makes a ton of sense to me. Thank you. Great presentation.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Just comment that I know this has been in the works since I've been on the board for several years, and it just keeps moving forward positively. So thank you very much. Let's see. So with Bill being out, I think that bumps us down to agenda item H, the IGA board membership.
Yeah, this one has been kind of kicked from meeting to meeting for a while. And I think we just wanted to, if I recall correctly, I think Emerald was was serving on the IG as the IGA board liaison, and you all asked to just revisit that and just for capacity reasons, see if there's another person who's interested in having that representation. I guess, Colin, I'm sorry to bring this on you. Can you speak to the commitment on the IGA board, its monthly meetings, and anything else that you could fill in?
Absolutely. So IGA board, the Levy Ready Columbia IGA board last year requested somewhat more of a streamlined meeting schedule, but it still meets, I guess, breaks down to about every other month. So about 6 meetings and coordination with your other board members. The main focus of the IGA board is to recertify the levy system. And so they're working both on projects and especially management of the staff around feasibility study and continuing work on that, making sure that there is good communication and kind of elevating messaging both with our partner agencies as well as at the state and elsewhere. And then for the projects that are not in the feasibility study, it's the direct responsibility of the IGA board to move those projects from sort of concept into these kind of initial designs. And so that's what they've been working on, and making sure that they hold true to the spirit of the Declaration of Cooperation that requests multi-benefit project design. So yeah, about every other month, a couple hours, and then also keeping your board members updated and up to speed.
Great, thank you, Colin. Let me jog my memory here for a minute. I think what we had talked about is, so Emerald had inherited this responsibility, and I don't recall exactly, I think it was because she inherited it from Phil Ralston, I believe. But I think in conversation with Emerald, it was going to be a little bit, she already has quite a full plate. And I believe, is it right, Claudio, that you thought you might have the capacity to step into this role? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, I just find myself with all kinds of time these days, so let's do it.
All right, well, thank you for that, and I'll buy you a spare space heater.
I can go into.
Is there anything?
Oh,
great, thank you.
I can go into the executive report if that's helpful, and see if Bill is able to make it before we end. First of all, I just want to let you know, please give the staff a lot of breathing room. With this, we've had 6 very meaty, we have 6 very meaty meetings this month for presentation, and preparing, and we're preparing to move into the budget season. So appreciate your patience and understanding as we do that. Wanted to give you a couple updates. One is on the CFO. We have 2 really good candidates, and I anticipate a final decision at the end of next week. We went through, I think we got about over 30 applications. We were down to about 16 that met minimum quals. We had a speed dating meeting down to 7, and we went down to 4, and now we're down to the top 2. So I feel really strongly, feel really good about it, and hope they're on board, and our goal is to have them on board in February. The other thing I wanted to cover was the executive director recruitment, which is moving forward. We hired Mary Rowe at Workplace Results LLC. She used to work, She did a lot of work at Metro for a number of years as their HR and managed that. So she's now under contract. We are, as you know, we went out with a quick survey of board members to determine, kind of get a feel of where people stand and what attributes they're looking for. The survey that's back from the board, and we sent it to all the boards, including the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District boards. The two top attributes people are looking for is the ability to navigate complex financial, operational, legal, and technical and political challenges, to come up with strategic solutions. And the second one was the ability to clearly articulate a vision to effectively support and coordinate multiple boards in the short term, while still keeping their eye focused on the common long-term goal that we're all working toward with the new district. So those came up from the board members as the top two.
This is Piggy, hi, it's Jeff. Anecdotally, and no names, of course, what was the response rate back from the board, the MCDD boards? 10%, 50%, 100%?
Not 100, but I'll let Emily make a flyer at that one because it wasn't real high.
Yeah, I think about 50% total of all the drainage district board members.
Okay, thanks.
Which I feel, that's as good as I would have anticipated. The interesting thing is we also sent it out to staff because we really kind of wanted their feedback as well as, what are they looking for in in the next position. And their first comment was the ability to lead, motivate, and inspire staff through organizational change, which I think is a really good, that's good. And then the second one agreed with the top choice of the boards, which is the ability to navigate complex financial, operational, legal, technical, and political challenges to come to effective solutions. So I think we're all pretty well aligned. This will help to help Mary and Tracy, our HR leader, to start to put together the job description and what we're looking for and what a successful candidate would look like. We anticipate that that'll go out the first. We have 4 urban flood safety members that want to participate in this recruitment, and MCDD is developing a few from their side. I am also going to participate since I have no skin in the game except to make sure that I can look at it from what I feel needs to happen in the insides. You guys are on the outside. I'm kind of in the meat of it. I will not be part of that final decision, but to help through the process. And we hope to get that description out the 1st of February and have that individual in-house by the first part of May. A couple other things I wanted to go over. On the legislative agenda, just for you to know, the bill that we're sponsoring or supporting, I should say. Evan may slap me for saying sponsoring, but a bill we're supporting was the infrastructure funding, a grant program for statewide systems. I think 65% of that is focused on the rural communities, but there'll still be money in there for us as well. And these will be grants to assist with levee systems and flood safety. And then also the other concern was there was a lot of back and forth on who would be the next speaker. And it turned out it is Tina, which was very helpful for all of us because Tina is extremely supportive of our districts and also a major promoter of the new setting up the new district. And since we are planning to go in for some additional grant funding, it provides us a greater opportunity. If someone else had been speaker, we would not have. I don't think we would have gotten much the time of the day. Assessments, just wanted to give you a brief overview, and Casey may step in and slap me that I might be incorrect, but you know, your total assessments for this year is about 228,000, and we've collected about 93%, which is exactly along what we collected this time last year. So, you know, as a percentage. So, and you're a little ahead of some of the districts as far as collections. The other thing that I wanted to add is we are working, Casey is working with Sheila at the city, and we're putting together our request for special appropriations, and also working with BES on some funding. So those efforts are, I think we're going to get something back. Casey, do you want to add to that?
There I am. I was going to say something and I got so flustered getting my computer set up that we were talking about the money. Oh, yeah. I just wanted to let all the city employees on the Penn One board know that I am, well, half listening to the rest of this meeting. I've been filling out a decision package form for the special appropriation to benefit Penn One. So much fun.
Appreciate it. As a board member, I appreciate it as somebody who's had to fill out the same, my sympathies.
Yeah, thank you. 3 or 4 sentences to describe Penn One's financial situation and why we're asking for money and what for. That's a tough one. And I'm also meeting with, I think 4 or 5 people at BES next week. As you know, they have a new director of business operations who will take some educating to get up to speed on the whole arrangement we have with BES to help fund the capital program in Penn One and provide some operating support. So I will be talking to them next week. And Peggy, if I could grab your attention on this, I'm going to send you something. I'm just asking if you want to join me or if anybody else would like to join me. So please keep an eye out for that in your email.
Okay, I will be, and I will close the loop with Mike Jordan tomorrow. And I wanted to also give you kind of where we are on the Urban Flood Safety Water Quality District. As you know, we talked about getting, we went out for recruitment for a financial advisor to help figure out what I can kind of consider the bridge loan that they need for operations until the new district is stood up. So Piper Sandler was selected. We're working with them. Our goal is to request, just for general purposes, $5 million, which we anticipate is needed, probably a little more than what's needed for getting them to stand up a permanent board, but that's also going to be contingent upon where we are in the feasibility study. And our goal would be that it would be no interest, preferably, of course, no interest over the time frame, and no principal payment. That's going to be dependent on, of course, how we go out for those bids. And we are looking and working with the new district has a budget for shortfall committee that we're working with. And so we are determining what is our best strategy for potential guarantee of that line of credit. We'll be starting to work through that and the timeline necessary to get this all accomplished. They are also in the process of, we've set up some committees that we feel, and they have feel comfortable with. And so we are in the process of setting up their mission, vision, value committee, which already has 7 people involved. We've got their executive recruitment people, or executive recruitment committee, which has 4 of their members. We've got the revenue committee. We've got our diversity and equity and environmental committee, and an outreach committee that we anticipate will be woven into the entire process. And the purpose of the committee is just to remind everyone, this is a board of 17 members. I think there's an ability to have to work more effectively with smaller groups and committees and bring back recommendations and strategies to the larger board for decision making. So that's kind of the approach we've taken. We are putting together their work plan for next year, and what their staff requirements are. And they have to, they are, as that we are not, our current districts are not subject to TSCC. This board is, so our budget season is going to be dictated somewhat by our requirements to TSCC. And then next board meeting is next week, and they'll be adopting their bylaws that they've been going over and evaluating over the last 4 to 5 months. They're going to get their first overview of the feasibility study. The reason that we wanted to do that was because the ability for us to move forward is somewhat contingent on, isn't somewhat, to do construction. I think everyone has considered that any construction under the core study is probably going to require a general obligation bond. As a result, that is part of our ability to make this happen. So we have included them in recognizing that general obligation bond is more likely to be the responsibility of the new district, the new permanent district. And I think that's about it. Any questions?
Great report, really helpful. Thank you, Becky.
If there's anything else that you do want to hear on a regular basis, please let me know so that I can bring it to this board. But I'm trying to make this, you guys are all working toward the same goal, so we all need to be aware of what everyone else is doing, so nobody goes off the path and goes out on their own walkabout. So, and Emily, do you know if Bill is back in?
I'm letting him in right now.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're letting his whole family in.
Yeah.
There's a real show for you.
Okay. Bill, are you on? Well, maybe not yet. Maybe we can jump. Claudio, I think Claudio, would it be okay to introduce any new business? Would that be okay while we're waiting?
Yeah, actually, it's really timely in relation to Peggotty's last remarks, about folks going their own way. I just wanted to raise, sorry, I had to change location. My power was about to run out. Just wanted to raise a concern or, an issue that, I'd love to, that I think would be really important for the board and staff to think about. My sense, having been on the board for the last couple of years. It can't be 2 years. Is it really? No, it's got to be a year. I don't even know anymore.
More
No,
than
it's 2 years.
It's more than a year because I've been here.
It's really
over a
2 years.
year.
I guess I keep skipping COVID as time. And so, but it's just that, my sense is that there is a perception, particularly in the other districts around, there's a narrative around Penn One's sort of maybe financial delinquency, or in some way our dereliction of our responsibilities to provide the services in our district, and somehow that those things would carry forward into some issues in the new district, and I feel like this narrative is out there, largely because of the financial problems that we have. But I think it's important to recognize that those problems, they haven't been solved permanently, but they've been addressed in the near term, and they've been addressed consistently. And in fact, we've got a considerable amount of support from the city in various forms, from BES, from the general fund, from parks, and closing the gaps, addressing a lot of capital work, and so I just wanted to ask sort of, maybe it's not, I don't think it's for this agenda, but maybe it's something that we need to discuss as a board. How do we address this narrative? Because I do think that it has the potential to take us off track as we move forward in the conversations around the urban, because, as we talked about earlier today about allocation methodologies, I worry that we will, this narrative can drive conversations around allocation methodologies, when I think that, as staff laid out, you guys are doing some great thinking about how these costs should be allocated. And I know that as a group, we've spent, and I was not there for it, but I can only imagine the lift to get the state legislation passed to allow us to go to a broader geography to address capital projects. We kept the door open for a utility model in order, frankly, to charge me more, and I fully understand that that's appropriate. While the city of Portland has paid every tax bill we've received, we recognize that Measure 5 has put some limitations on what on what we were charged. So I think that we've collectively been working to solve these problems together, and I do worry that this, what I believe is a very false narrative, and maybe it would be helpful to hear from staff at some point around maybe some of the history that I'm missing. But I know that Bill's going to actually talk a little bit about a number of capital projects that are almost $500,000 that were funded by the city of Portland. I mean, this district has had its issues, but folks have been stepping up to make sure that no step is missed, as far as I can tell. So it'd be really, really helpful to have this conversation at some point, so that we can really create, sort of redirect that narrative with the other districts, and help them understand the true nature of Penn One, and how we are not a boat anchor around the new district, but a valued partner that's had challenges just like all the districts, and continued to do the work over the years, just like all the districts. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but I wanted to put a flag in that.
Thank you, Claudio. I'm gonna make note of that. I do think it's one worth coming back to. I think it would be a lengthy discussion just to frame what we're talking about. But a couple of reasons. One is I think by default, not by intention, is the result of the risk.
I think we've lost James. James?
Or the risk of loss of life and property. There's that piece that I think is sometimes missing. And there's also, we might also need to capture what's the trend, the trajectory of. So anyway, it sounds like I've got kind of a bad connection, but Claudia, I'll make an action item here for us to find a time to TLA to make sure we're kind of doing this as a within the context of public meeting law to offer at this time.
Yeah, no, that would be great. No, you know, I know that that Emerald had to drop off, and I think it's important. It's an issue that I'd really like to open up with the entire board and make sure that we're speaking as one and working with staff to make sure that you know. Well, let me just put it this way. Recent events have highlighted the importance of settling on an agreed set of facts. And you know, I think that this is an instance of that where you know, I'd love to make sure that we have a shared understanding with our partner districts around the facts associated with our district. So you know, having everybody involved in the conversation, James, you too, when you get a good connection. So that'd be great if we could get that on a future agenda.
And if I can speak up, this is Peggotty. I think it's an excellent idea because it has us all speaking off the same sheet of music. And what is not seen necessarily in the published budget is all of the contributions that the city is making. And we need to, we need to have a little bit of a history, which I don't have all of it, but you know, how we are where we are, the assumptions and contributions that are being made. And so we will focus on that. I don't think we'd be able to do it before March because we are up to our neck and alligators. But if that is good with you, sometime in March or April, then okay, we will do that. I think it's important.
This is a long-term conversation. I think, you know, let's wait to do it right. That's fine.
Okay.
Great. Thank you both. Are we ready to turn it over to Bill and jump back to agenda item E with the CIP update? Do we have Bill on?
I'm here.
Great. Thank you, Bill.
Yes, thanks. I'm afraid I don't have the CIP one-page summaries in front of me because I'm in the car, but if they're, I believe you received them in your board packet prior to this meeting, and I'd like to, in lieu of not having those in front of me, I'd like just to open up for questions if there's anything from what you read through those.
From my perspective, they were helpful as always, super informative. So thank you, Bill.
You're welcome. Anything else? There's nothing today. You're certainly welcome to reach out to Peggy and Emily, and they can forward me questions about those particular, any particular projects that are going on. We're making progress, and yeah, and we'll keep you informed. Our next scheduled update probably will be either your March or April meeting.
Great. And actually, one suggestion I would make for future memos, Bill, I noticed in one of them you did highlight the source of funding as BES. You know, if we could make that a sort of a consistent portion of those reports, that would be wonderful.
So just to be clear, Claudia, you'd like me to note the source of the funding, whether it's from assessments or an outside funding entity?
That would be ideal.
Okay, noted.
That aligns with our previous conversation.
Just a quick question, Bill. Do you know when we'll have our next CIP update? Will that be? Are we doing those kind of monthly or quarterly? What's the schedule?
Yeah, James, we're intending to do those quarterly. So the next one will be either in March or April.
Great, thank you. Okay, are we going to move on then now to item G, the assets and liabilities, the definitions? I think everyone received that slide deck in the materials. Do we want to have, can we have that discussion or that presentation now, or how do you want to approach that?
James, if the
looks like Emily's
question
going
is
to pull
me,
up her
I'm happy
screen.
to move forward.
Yeah, Bill, I've got your slides up, so just let me know. I think you can go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So I appreciate the time to allow the board to allow me to give an update on what's been happening with this project. You read a little bit more about the background, just as a reminder of how the project initiated and the need for the project, which we'll go in again next. Can you advance one slide? So yes, this slide includes some of the highlights of what the project entails. As you may remember, we're being directed, your district board, as well as the other 3 districts or corporation, all have the responsibility to identify and value their assets and liabilities and transfer them eventually to the new urban district board. And so that's what this project is focused on. We have a group of board members, from not only your board, Claudio's representation, but also from the other 3 district boards, and 2 members from the urban district board. So that core group is providing providing a sounding board for us and some advice and some feedback how we pull together the information we need to present in cases exactly what we're doing right now. When we're doing that in support with some facilitation work from Jamie Damon at Kearns and West and Gordon Smith over at FCS Group for financial support. The next slide, please. This slide provides just an overview of an excerpt of the ORS statutes that drives our work and just highlights some of the text within that statute that's specific to that. I'll let you read the rest of those at your leisure because you have a copy of the handout. Next slide, please. All right, and just as a reminder about where we are in the process, the board working group has actually met 3 times already since early December, and we've given them some information about background about what is involved in developing a set of assets and liabilities and their evaluation. And we're at a point where we wanted to give have some information to share and have you as a individual board provide some feedback in this forum. The intent is we were going to collect information from you as well as the other 3 districts and provide an updated version of our materials at the format next week. Next slide, please. So if you read page through this material ahead of time, you'll know that we want to make sure that your board and others understand what the project deliverables are. As this is not something that I've encountered in my career so far. I'm not a specialist in mergers and acquisitions, but what I've learned as part of this process is the listing and valuation of assets and liabilities is a somewhat common exercise in that type of field, the mergers and acquisitions field. And in that, that process typically follows some pretty standard accounting practices and focuses quite a bit on the financial information that is that is typically published. So in our case, we plan to do the same. We're going to be focused on, at least in terms of the assets and liabilities compilation and valuation, we're going to stick to pretty standard and well-accepted accounting practices to pull that information together. And you'll see further down the line, that means we're focusing our what we consider an asset and a liability to the financial records that you have seen in past and have been audited each year. But from past conversations on this topic in general, we know that there are other items that we want to make sure that the new urban district is aware of beyond what's in the financial records. And that would be examples include our CIP, include needed easements, it includes some other things that I'll get into. So the project, the assets and liabilities project, will have a series of deliverables in its final report, not just sort of the core listing of assets and liabilities. And that's what this slide's about. You can see that on the second line. But also we want to make sure we understand, give some context of why this information is being pulled together. And that's why there's an item on here about the purpose of that valuation. We'll certainly identify what the definitions of assets and liabilities, as well as what the valuation method we use is. And finally, as part of the ORS, we want to make sure we identify what the duties that your district uses to drive its work. And those duties will be developed through an examination and review of the ORS statutes, as well as resolutions that your board and other boards have adopted over the years. So next slide, please. Right, so if you can shift your mind just for a moment about what, if we're just focusing on the assets and liabilities portion of this deliverable, we're going to use some pretty standard accounting practices, and this slide represents sort of a classic definition of what an asset is, and it talks about it has a useful life, provides future benefits, it can be measured. And in our case, your district has directed us to identify any asset as something that's above $1,000. For some of you, you know that's a pretty low number. Other public agencies will have $5,000 limits and above, depending on the type of assets. But in our case, we're sticking with $1,000 as our proposal because it would be cleanest to use that if someone else is going to try to compare what's in our asset and liability list to what's in our audited reports. So next slide. This slide provides a little more background to what an asset is, and I'll let you read this kind of at your own leisure. But it talks about some fairly standard principles of what the our financial team uses to determine what we capture in our financial reports. But they include things like cash and investments. An asset has to depreciate over time, with some exceptions as listed there about land or water rights. And it's the valuation, we have to make sure it's understandable to others that it's a valuation at a point in time. So it could change in a couple of years because of depreciation. And finally, there's a category called assets in progress or construction in progress. If you looked into our audited reports, you would see those. So we'd make sure that we include those in our estimate, in our our list of assets in this case. Next slide, please. So on the liability side, again, it's fairly straightforward. It focuses on a legal obligation for a future cost. We're talking about debts, accounts payable, and so forth. Some of the other bullets in this slide about employees and retirements focus will be more of an interest for MCDD because that's where we all are employed by. One thing that, and I alluded to this earlier, one thing that's not included in a legal obligation of a liability is or proposed capital investments. So those could be the CIP that I just mentioned. It can also include the feasibility study recommendations and levy accreditation projects. And we all know those are important, and we put a lot of time and investment in developing those. And so this is partly why there are other considerations that need and other deliverables that are needed as part of this project. So it's a prelude to the next slide, where I identify what additional deliverables will be included at the end. So they would include outside capital contributions from grants, for instance, like FEMA. In Pen 2, for instance, there was a contribution that Walmart made to the district when Walmart was developed, and Walmart paid the district a certain amount of money to perform a certain action, in this case, doing some pipe inspection. So those will be examples. Capital contributions from folks like the city of Portland, which Claudio referenced just earlier, would also be something we want to highlight and identify, not just for Penn 1, but for the other districts as well. SDIC is another example of money coming from the city of Troutdale. Intangible assets are something that we're going to want to make sure we keep track of. We have existing ones. And of course, there are several voids of easements that we'll need, and you've heard about as part of the levee improvements, but also for pump stations as well. And finally, there's a list of known asset or capital liabilities or capital investments that we would prefer to construct if we're able to. And so we want to make sure that the new urban district is aware of that information and how much those cost. Next slide, please. So that's an overview of what the assets and liabilities entail. The board working group did have an opportunity and time to talk a little bit about a valuation method for those assets and liabilities. And we eventually landed on the recommendation from our financial consultant, which is this original cost less depreciation approach. The advantage of using that approach is that it tracks very closely to how our current financial reports are put together, and our depreciation reports are put together at the district. There are other options that we did consider, including market income and another cost approach. They're listed here. The market approach is similar to what one might do when you're buying or selling a house, but there's not. We're not in that type of buyer-seller relationship for this situation. The income approach is valid, and but it requires a fair amount of data to pull together and make some assumptions in order to come up with our final estimates. And the long and short of this is that you can go through that exercise, but the end result may not be much different than the original cost less depreciation approach, and you spend a lot more time to get to more or less the same place. And so we decided that may not be the best match for us. And there's also a different cost approach besides OCLD in situations where the assets are relatively new, which is not the case in Penn 1 or frankly that almost any of the other districts. So because of that, the project team and the board working group is proposing that we use this OCLD method. The last slide just gives you a little overview of what the next steps involve. As I said, we're trying to collect some feedback today. And the rest of this week, I'm going to compile that information and do another presentation next week at the format, just so all 4 boards understand what type of feedback was provided and any adjustments are made of the contents that you saw today. And then moving forward, we'll start applying some of this information. The intent is to put together a pilot deliverable. So it's sort of a test drive, if you will, of this information and how it applies, and give the board working group and you all a sense of what the application and the application results look like. And if it feels like we're on the right track, we'll apply it to the total data set we have and pull the final report in June. So that's the presentation. It was a little quick going through it. Hopefully you had a chance to glance through the slides ahead of and the summary page ahead of time, but I'll open up to any questions at this point. And sorry, Claudio was participating in those discussions, the board working group. So if he has anything he wanted to add to my description, I welcome those comments.
Yeah, no, the presentation was great. I think it hit on all the points of our conversation. It's been, you know, as Bill mentioned, we've we've met several times in just the last month, spent a lot of time together. It's been a really robust discussion, really well supported by staff and the consultants. So really appreciate it. And I think we're headed in the right direction. So thank you, Bill.
Yep. Thanks, Claudio.
Great. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Claudio. Very helpful. My presentation, or the presentation, was cutting out a little bit for me. I've got one bar here. This is maybe just, I think, a quick question and maybe something to consider for future meetings and presentations. I apologize if I've missed this. I really appreciate that you're piloting this and kind of giving it a test drive, so to speak, through a certain type of asset. Can you say a little bit more about how the end product will be, or the process and the end product will work? For example, are these is there like a tool methodology, like an Excel-based, formula-based methodology for putting a certain asset and other inputs into a tool, and then we get an output? And if so, is there a QA QC to see if it's actually working for our scenario, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I believe I tracked your comment, James. It is not, there's not a particular off-the-shelf tool that we'll be using to develop this. It's likely going to be Excel based. I have put in some QA/QC measures already as we working behind the scenes to list all of our assets. We're doing some internal checks, but I welcome about how that what additional QA/QC you might be interested in. And that's maybe something I can bring up to the board working group to deliver a little bit as well. James, were you able to catch that?
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now.
We heard that question. I don't know if there's anything else to go with it.
No. I will hold my questions until I'm better connected. Thanks a lot, Bill.
Okay. Other comments or questions? Okay, well, I appreciate your time. I'll circle back with James separately to make sure I have I understand what his comment was, and I'll make sure to bring it up next week. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bill. And thank you for calling in and the work you were doing out in the field today. Thank you to the whole team as well. I believe if my agenda here serves me correctly, I think we have gotten through the entire agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for calling in today. I really apologize that my connection was poor and I had to call in from a remote location. I guess if there are no further questions or comments, we will go ahead and close the January meeting of the Penn 1 Board of Supervisors, and just again say thank you to everyone for calling in. Thank you to the staff as always for being meeting experts. My goodness. Thank you for all your work, and enjoy the sunny day, and we'll see you folks at the format. I believe that's is that next week?
Yes.
Great. All right. Thank you, folks. Take care.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.